The beginning for me is that the military is kind of the family business. A fourth generation veteran. So my dad was Air Force, which we try not to hold against him.
Please don't.
But, primarily Army and Marines in the family, few Navy here and there. My uncle was Navy in Vietnam. I also had a cousin who was Navy. But I had two other uncles who were Marines, Vietnam era, and then several cousins, all Army and Marines. I was Army. My grandfather was a World War II Army veteran, and my great-grandfather was a Spanish-American War Army veteran.
Oh, wow.
So we don't know that he ever actually met Teddy Roosevelt, but he went to Cuba with the forces that were deployed to Cuba in the Spanish-American War.
Okay.
So it was always sort of intuitive to me that at some point in my life I would serve in some capacity. I was really considering doing it right out of high school, but my dad kind of talked me out of it because I had a full ride scholarship to college already. And so he's like, well, just go to school and kind of do that and then figure it out because you can always, join later. So that's what I ended up doing, and enlisted in the Army right at the end of college, which was actually kind of fortuitous because the first semester of my freshman year of college is when 9/11 happened. So if I had joined right out of high school, I probably would have deployed immediate. So my dad kind of, at least saved me from being in the thick of it.
You dodged that bullet, huh?
Dodged that bullet, thanks to my dad's advice. But, like I said, joined the Army in 2005, right as I was getting out of college, and then had planned to make a career out of it, but then a medical review board said otherwise. And so I ended up serving 9 years, and then at that point was medically discharged honorably. But one of those deals where I was a little bit too forthcoming on a periodic health assessment, and the next thing I know, I'm in front of a review board, and
those are never any fun.
No fun. And then they basically, in not so many words, tell you that you're too sad to murder people and we have no use for you.
But that was your whole campaign.
Yeah, it's like that was the whole thing. So that kind of encapsulates, where that all started, as far as my military career. It was great. Went in, enlisted, promoted all the way up to sergeant, and then went to warrant officer candidate school, commissioned as a warrant officer, and was actually about to be eligible for CW2 when I got out. But, had a lot of great experiences, had some not so great experiences, as, just about everybody who serves, can attest to. But I don't regret it at all. I think it was a very formative experience in my life, and definitely learned a lot of good things, a lot of useful skills, and gained a lot of, I guess you could say, life experience through those 9 years of service that I don't think I would have found anywhere else. But it was definitely an interesting range of experiences.
What was your MOS?
So I had 3 enlisted MOSs during my career. 2 of them were signal. I enlisted as a 25 uniform, which is Signal Systems Support Specialist, which is a really fancy way of saying radio operator repairman.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. And then while I was with a combat engineer unit, their unit structure got realigned, and they lost their comms person slot, but they wanted to keep me. So they put me in a fuel handler position. And so then they sent me to Fort Lee, and I got qualified as a 92 Fox petroleum distribution specialist. and so stayed with them for a while longer. And I drove a fuel tanker and I fixed radios.
Your unit must have loved you for that, though, at least.
Yeah, no, they were like, look, we really can't afford to lose you because you're really good at your job, and we also don't want to have to rely on the higher command to send a radio guy out every time we need something fixed or installed. So they figured out a workaround, as you often do. And so they just put me in a different slot, which required me to be qualified in that slot. And so I went to school, and there you go. So then I was, the mobile gas station and the radio guy, which was fine. And it was a fun experience. And I learned a lot about not only how petroleum distribution systems work, but a lot about pipes and how just plumbing works, which is not a bad thing to have experience in. And then a little bit later on, when I promoted to sergeant, I took a 25 Bravo slot, which is information technology. So then I went to school again, got qualified as an information technology specialist when I promoted to E5. And then when I put in my warrant packet, I was a 251 Alpha, which is Signal Corps warrant officer.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of communications, a lot of electronics.
At least you kept it the same, though.
Yeah, it was fairly consistent, and I had some additional duties. I went to some specialty schools, like, for example, I went to the ComSec custodian course. So I handled crypto for a while, got a TS clearance, which people think that's really glamorous, but actually most of the time is extraordinarily boring. It's one of those jobs where you sit inside of a metal cage with a bunch of equipment behind 3 locked doors and make people sign paperwork and threaten to put them in jail if they lose the stuff.
Or open it or do anything they're
right.
not supposed
Yeah,
to.
don't look at it or touch it. It's kind of like, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Do not open this box kind of thing.
Basically, yes.
But they didn't tell me anything about Area 51 or, Bigfoot or any of that stuff.
Bastards.
But I know. I had to figure all that out on my own.
But one day they'll let us know about Nessie.
Yeah.
One
yeah.
day.
Yeah. One day, I think. I'm very hopeful. I was a huge dinosaur nerd when I was a kid, so I really always wanted to know about Nessie. Because I'm just holding out hope that Nessie's the last dinosaur on Earth, and that one day.
And somehow it just stays in a Loch Ness, and no one's ever really discovered or found or proof.
Right, exactly. Mostly because most people don't want to travel in Scotland, I guess, for whatever reason, even though I would love to go there personally.
Oh, I know.
But
That in Ireland.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, Nessie and Bigfoot and all that stuff, I've also, found to be very fascinating topics. Not really related to military service for me personally, although there's a couple of interesting channels on social media and whatnot that specifically collect people's paranormal and cryptid stories about military service, which I follow and enjoy reading. But didn't have any Area 51 experiences in my military service, even with my top secret security clearance.
Again, the top secret doesn't really do much for us.
No, it really doesn't. You got to get to like Q level or some kind of compartmentalized, the ones that the Department of Energy hands out, that's where it's really at.
You won't know anything until they assign you bodyguards.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, just because you can badge in and out of the skiff doesn't really mean a whole lot.
Yeah.
But
do your logs, paper boy.
Yeah, pretty much. That was it. Sign here and here and here, and if you lose this thing that's in this box, you're going to go to jail forever.
It's about $5 million.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's about the long and the short of it.
Yeah, I remember doing all the ComSec because I did ComSec repair, and
right.
They're like they when they're teaching you about it, they're almost making it like it's the Holy Grail. Like, all right, take off these 20,000 screws around the top, and then you're like, what the fuck am I looking at?
Yeah,
it's a bunch of circuit cards, man.
It's just circuit boards, man. Yeah, I actually went to depot level repair course for Singar's radios, and that's exactly what we did. It's like, okay, now you're going to open the thing that they tell you never, ever, ever to open, and peel off the sticker that they tell you to never, 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 never peel off, and then it's just a bunch of like cards. They just slot in and out.
And repairing them so stupid. It
Yeah.
sucked.
Yeah. Yeah. You just, using an O-scope and figuring out which of these circuit cards is bad and then replacing it and then putting everything back together. And that's really it.
But I think the one thing I loved about the job is the unique stories of how they got damaged.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many ones.
I've got a good one for you.
Go for it.
So at a field exercise at NTC, had a lieutenant who thought
Of
that
course.
the radio was overheating, opened his canteen, and poured water on it to cool it off.
Because they're waterproof too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they do have that gasket in there, but no, they're not.
No, you can't dump an entire canteen of water on a $150,000 radio and expect it to continue to function.
It don't work that way.
No, it does not. It does not.
But no, I mean, because we've had people, dig old gashes in the top of the damn thing. Like, what the hell did you do? We accidentally ran over it.
Yeah,
With what?
Or
we dropped it.
Yeah.
From where?
From where?
Were you jumping out of a C-130 and it fell off? I can understand that, but
Yeah.
But those things are like bricks. They just stick in the ground. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen it all. Trust me. It's crazy. Probably the most interesting radio story in terms of like, how do I make this work? Square peg, round hole was during a disaster relief mission in Haiti, where we needed operators of heavy equipment to be able to communicate via radio. And those pieces of equipment typically don't have a radio mount installed. And it's like, okay, well, let me study the electrical system of, this heavy earth moving equipment and figure out exactly how I can splice in and not have the incorrect voltage and fry this very expensive radio to install this radio mount. And it was a lot of duct tape and bale twine to make that work. And then, of course, doing ride-alongs and going out with them and making sure it worked and testing it and doing all the stuff. And so got to see firsthand exactly what it was like in the aftermath of that earthquake and the operations that went on with that, because it started out as search and rescue, but unfortunately very quickly deteriorated into we need to prevent the surviving population from all dying of cholera. And so they were trying to dispose of remains as expeditiously as possible, and ended up in a lot of cases moving bodies with bulldozers. Dig a hole, bulldoze the remains in.
Almost like a mass grave.
Mass graves, and cover it up. And sometimes it was just mixtures of rubble and parts of people and just all of it, and just burying it, not out of any kind of disrespect, but just out of the sheer emergency of, tens of thousands of human remains laying about in a disaster area that encompassed, the major population center of Haiti, and the surviving population having to figure out how to survive with an environment that was being contaminated by decomposing human remains. And that is quite a shock to the system, especially for, somebody who spends most of their life in the electronic shop.
Yeah.
And, but interestingly enough, I ended up doing a lot of that because I got really adept at these unconventional solutions to making communication systems work in ways that they weren't designed to work, and ended up going on a lot of disaster type missions in a lot of different places, all over the United States and even outside of the country, as an emergency communications specialist, which was another interesting school that I went to learn interoperability, how to make the military's radios, talk to the first responders' radios, talk to, this, that, and the other thing, and even helped put together exercises to train people on how to do that, at the state and municipal level, and working with like ham radio operators as volunteers and things like that. And did some cool stuff. At one point we were kind of trying to challenge ourselves, and it's like, how many hops on different pieces of equipment can we do and make this work? And we ended up going from a headquarters location to a location 300 miles away, from a landline phone into a radio on a Humvee, out to a relay tower, through a couple of hops of like different civilian radio equipment and locations in between, to somebody's cell phone on the other end.
Nice.
So all of this through various pieces of interoperability equipment, because it's not like, okay, I just plug this thing into that other thing. It's like, no, I plug this thing into this specialized piece of technology, then it outputs to this other thing, and so on and so on, hops and skips down the chain. But it's really interesting to know that you can, in fact, accomplish those things, if you have to, in a situation where you can't just pick up something and talk to somebody else. For example, like when the tornado hit Joplin, and we were on the ground within, hours after, and there were no radio towers for miles.
Yeah, it knocked them all down.
There was nothing.
It was like prime targets for those.
Yeah, it was flattened. I mean, it was devastated. And so, we had assets that brought in cell towers on the backs of trucks that were just on a giant, 100-foot long boom, arm that would stand up and then, establish cell service. And we piggybacked off of that, and we stuck some radio antennas and things on those, and made sure that the crews that were out there could talk to each other, because you got ambulances that could only talk as far as their radio antenna on the truck would reach. And so we had to go out there and set up relays because the area was too big for that, and the same with police and fire and search and rescue and all that stuff. And so I think that one thing that people probably don't appreciate until it becomes a problem is that your ability to communicate is one of the key linchpins in the operation when it comes to any kind of a mission where you're trying to help people, whether it's search and rescue or, disaster relief of any kind or a military operation, is that if you can't talk, you can't coordinate, you can't move, you can't shoot, you can't do anything.
Makes it so much harder.
Right. Yeah. Because you're left with, you can talk as far as the little antenna on your radio can reach, and that's it, which if you're lucky might be a few miles, depending on the terrain. Sometimes less.
Terrain, cloud condition,
exactly.
Everything. I mean,
yeah.
Because I was growing up in Oklahoma City,
right?
Well, close there, and we had a tornado like 99. It was like a huge tornado.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And that night, like the devastation caused by it. I'm maybe high schoolish, middle schoolish, whatever. We, my mother had this old RV camper that she converted into a dog grooming business.
Okay.
That night after the tornado hit, me and my father were going around town with it to get the generator put out so people could at least have the littlest amount of electricity to call loved ones, to charge something, to cook a meal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's, when something like that happens, it's seldom expected. Most of the time people are unprepared. Best case scenario, you might have a generator in the garage or the shed or somewhere that you can fire up.
That you haven't touched in 10 years.
That
don't know.
You probably haven't maintenanced or serviced.
You let the gas in from 5 seasons ago.
Yeah, exactly. And, if you're lucky, you get it to run. And then you can keep your food from spoiling, hopefully. But in a lot of those situations, it's really tough for people.
That's why we try to plan out here, especially with different aspects. Just last year, we had a tornado right up at the end of the road.
Yeah.
And we weren't home, thankfully, but it tripped me out because, that's close to home, literally. But
yeah,
I mean, we have propane stove to make sure we can always cook our meals.
Right.
If the neighbors need a food, we can make
Yeah.
the meals for them too.
Exactly.
I mean, all sorts of stuff, like even filling up your tub full of water so you can have toilet water. People don't consider this kind of crap, and it's sad. But
It is, and this part of Texas, you're just as likely to get a hurricane as you are a tornado.
Mm-hmm.
And also there is some level of risk of, winter weather disasters happening, even though, right now that's the furthest thing from anybody's mind because we're all like, oh my God, I wish it would snow.
Yeah.
But that too, what was it, 3 or 4 years ago when they had that really hard freeze down here?
Mm-hmm.
That was right before I actually moved to Texas. But, even that is a risk. So you've got all these different kinds of things to prepare for, and each one requires a little bit different sort of a preparedness plan.
Because, I mean, our pipes aren't set up like the Norse. I mean,
No.
If we dip below 32 for a while, you're going to have some busted pipes. And people don't take into consideration, what about draining your water heater? Bust your water heater open.
Yeah, exactly. People don't think to check and see, is it going to get down below 32 tonight? Should I leave the taps running in my house?
I mean, we're always watching the weather.
Yeah.
If we know it's going to be bad, we start watching it.
Exactly.
And my girlfriend, she has this tachycardia thing.
Yeah.
So when there's stuff going off in the Gulf, she's going, this is going to get bad. Like the last 2 we had, weathermen for days, it's only going to be 10%. It's only going to be 10%.
Mm-hmm.
She's going, no, we're going to get hit.
Yeah.
Got hit every fucking time.
Yeah. It's funny, those ways that people's bodies respond to changes in the weather and the seasons and things like that. Growing up in the Ozarks, there was a lot of what most people would call superstition.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it is just folk wisdom. Like, my granny would predict the weather based on how the smoke came out of the stovepipe. She's like, well, the smoke from the stovepipe is dipping down before it goes up. That means it'll snow within the next 24 hours. And what that was is actually an indicator of a change in barometric pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like, oh, my bad knee is aching, we're going to get rain or this or that. When really all that is like people learn to observe the behavior of animals or the behavior of their environment or how their body responds to changes in things like barometric pressure and humidity. And it kind of gets codified in this folk wisdom or superstition, over the course of many generations. And then people kind of just laugh it off. And it's like, oh, that's, quaint and silly, but it's really not.
No.
For many, many, many generations, there were no weathermen. You had a weather vane. If you were really fancy a couple hundred years ago, you might have had a barometer, maybe.
Yeah.
Back when they were first invented. If you were really fancy, maybe a barometer to watch, but for the most part, you had a weather vane, maybe a thermometer, something like that, and that's about it. And the rest was purely observation. And I think that people would do well to kind of revive and preserve those skills because they're survival skills at the end of the day. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I count myself lucky to have grown up in a place where a lot of that is still handed down and mostly intact. And, not only growing up in a family full of veterans who have the skill set that veterans have, but also in a family full of people who very much lived and survived off of nature, from a very young age, hunting, fishing, gardening, foraging, all of those kinds of skills that a lot of people don't even get exposed to, except for maybe a little bit because they were in Boy Scouts or something. But that was just like lived reality.
Yeah.
Of course, we went to the grocery store just like everybody else, but we supplemented a large part of that with what you could bring home from the pond and the woods and those kinds of things, whether it was wild game or fish or edible plants, edible mushrooms, berries. It was really common growing up. Me, my siblings, my cousins would go out and just pick all the berry bushes clean and come home with, a bucket full of berries, and then mom or grandma makes a pie.
Oh, the blackberries, man.
Yeah.
I hated those thorns, though.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, and it makes it all the more rewarding when you bring that bucket of berries in and then you sit there and wear your arm out cranking an old-timey ice cream churn. But that cobbler and ice cream
was the best ever.
And you just don't appreciate it as much when you can just run down to the Kroger and shell out $15 and bring it home and stuff it in your face.
For
it's
some
just not the same.
Over-processed, artificially flavored bullshit.
Yeah, and it's got all kinds of stuff in it that's really not that great for you, as opposed to, straight from nature.
Oh yeah,
which is always preferable.
I mean, it's no wonder why they're just now starting to get rid of that all the different dyes in food.
Right. And regardless of political party leanings, I think that some of these health and wellness initiatives are really important, and people really need to stop paying attention to the argument over does the guy wear a red tie or a blue one, and start listening to what makes sense.
Put your own facts together, listen to each side,
right,
but make your own fucking conclusion. Don't
100%.
Don't be the sheep, man. And
yeah,
that's why I never really get into political arguments, because they're so not brainwashed, but in depth into their own political ideology that they can't see outside of it. It's just it's not worth it, man.
There's a lot of indoctrination, a lot of political tribalism. And, that's ultimately why I left working in the public school system, because, that was kind of the path that I took when I left the military. Well, at first I worked in civilian IT, and I very quickly discovered that was soul-sucking and depressing, because nobody calls help desk when they're happy and stuff works.
No. Well, I mean, because you always tell us how we turned it off and turned it on, unplug it and plug it back in.
Right. And they'll, they get to the point where they've heard it so many times, that's what they say when they call you. It's like, I already turned it back off and on again, and I unplugged it and I replugged it, and I did this, and this. I've already done all those things, so don't ask me if I've done it. And they're mad because they can't do their job or whatever thing's going on.
And they've been on hold for about 2 hours.
Right. Yeah. And all of that stuff. And so I quickly discovered that I did not want a career in civilian IT. And so I kind of did some soul searching, and I'm like, well, what could I do that I really find personally fulfilling or rewarding? And I'm like, well, I kind of missed getting to be sort of an instructor and a trainer. That was a really cool part of my military career, doing some of that instructional stuff. And so I'm like, well, I could probably be a teacher. I enjoyed school. So I pursued that, got into substitute teaching, and kind of did that as a full-time gig. And while I was doing that, worked through a program that helps veterans become certified to teach in school, and then worked in the public school system first as a paraprofessional, special education aide, and then eventually had my own classroom and taught middle school science for a while. And I loved the kids. The kids were never the problem, but it was all of the rules and the red tape and the regulation and the administrators that were really only concerned with satisfying those things that they were given to check these boxes, and there's a story I tell people to kind of illustrate and encapsulate that idea in one anecdote. And when I was teaching middle school science, I had this administrator come to me one day and reprimand me. And the gist of the reprimand was, stop teaching them so much. Stick to the curriculum, because that's what's on the state test. Like, I didn't even get to write my own curriculum. They gave me the curriculum because they wanted to cut out anything that didn't have anything to do with that state test at the end of the year. And that was it. To the point that if the kids were curious and wanted to ask questions and wanted to explore topics further, they would come to you and say, no, don't do that.
That's bullshit.
And that was kind of the moment that I realized this is not for me.
Well, because I mean, it's a really, teachers can have such a huge positive or negative impact on a child's life.
Right.
And I don't remember too many of my teachers, but there's only two I do remember: Mr. Stern, Mr. Excelente.
Mm-hmm.
Two teachers I had in Oklahoma. They were the best because Excelente was my science teacher.
Right.
Anytime, every morning before we went to class, me and my buddy would always approach him before we go to class, ask him whatever science question we could.
Right.
Our job was to stump him.
Right.
I think we did it maybe twice, but
yeah.
Just having that interaction with him and just being able to openly ask questions, again, I remember him to this day. Don't really remember too many others. So.
Right. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about being in that position is that people don't realize that as a teacher, for some students, you become the mentor and kind of the parent away from home that you might be the only adult that they trust to come to and say, hey, I've got this or that going on. And kids go through some really serious stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And they deal with some really heavy issues. In 1 year, I remember just in 1 year of working at a specific school that I worked at, I can't even count the number of times I heard my dad's in jail, we're sleeping in the car, I'm staying with my grandma because my mom's on drugs again, this, that, and the other thing. And even in one case, some students of mine lived in Section 8 housing, and a kid that lived in that same building that they lived in had gone missing. And when they finally found the kid, he had been murdered and dismembered and put in a suitcase and dumped. And when they found his body, these kids were like, we've been telling anyone who will listen to us that we think so-and-so did this. And the kids were right. So-and-so did do it.
But no one wanted to listen.
And no one listened to them because they were kids.
Mm-hmm.
And how terrifying must it be to be, a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid or younger and live in the same building as a man that you are almost certain killed your friend and hid his body, and try to tell adults just to have the adults not listen to you and not believe you.
Well, even at that, some of those housings, the parents are never going to be home because they're either working, in jail, sleeping with people, doing drugs. And these kids are probably fucking terrified.
Terrified. Yeah. Yeah. And as much as a lot of kids don't like being at school for reasons that are sometimes justified, it might be the only place that's even remotely safe for them to be.
That's their free space.
That's the only place where they may not be literally in fear for their life. Mm-hmm. Because that's the place where the person that hurts them every day isn't there, or the creepy neighbor who they think made their friend go missing is, or the guy that's trying to sell them drugs bothers them every day, or whatever other thing. These are real life everyday realities for children. And to be a teacher at a school where these kids go to school, you get exposed to all of the worries and cares and traumas of these kids. And that's heavy stuff.
Especially as a kid, you shouldn't have to have that much trauma. You should be worried about what's the next episode of SpongeBob, or if your friends are going to the park without you. And
or what do I want to be when I grow up? Or
prom.
Am I going to pass my spelling test or whatever? It shouldn't be these just unimaginable stressors that these kids go through, where school is the only place where I get fed, or school is the only place where somebody doesn't hurt me.
But even at that, you still got to, depending on the kid, you got to deal with the bullies, the teachers who look at you differently, maybe because you're poor or something. What if you get the bad grades? Now your parents are going to be pissed, or your teachers are going to be disappointed. And there's so fucking much that people
There's a lot.
And I think a lot of it is because there's some people that grew up in such a good household, good school,
Right.
pampered in a way that they can't see outside their tunnel. But
Sure.
I mean, some of the lives out there are just so brutal, man. It makes you really wonder how they get to where they get later in life.
Right. Yeah. And, it's interesting because, you hear phrases like the school to prison pipeline, for example. And we wonder, like, how do these concepts come to be and why are they a reality? But, in a lot of cases, like you said, the system lets these kids down. Like their families, unfortunately, for whatever reason, and I'm not here to judge anybody, but the cold hard truth and the reality of it is in a lot of cases, these kids' families are already letting them down for whatever the circumstance is. I'm not here to judge that. But then they go to school and the teachers a lot of times just see their behaviors at a surface level and they don't see the cry for help. They don't see the fact that that kid may not have eaten since yesterday at lunch.
Which is probably the free school meal. And,
right.
Which he's already getting picked on about. And,
right. All of that, all they do is they look at the behavior and they label that kid as a problem. Well, when you label the kid as a problem and you tell them that enough times, they internalize that and they start to see themselves as a problem. And then they don't see the potential within themselves for better. And they sort of give up. And by the time, they're in high school, if they don't choose to drop out, they get out and what are their prospects because they've been indoctrinated basically to believe that they're a problem and that they won't amount to anything. And so then they gravitate towards unhealthy coping mechanisms and unhealthy survival mechanisms that they've been exposed to. And then the cycle repeats, and then you end up with kids by the time they're out of school may already be dealing with substance use, addiction, alcoholism, pregnancy, take your pick of all of these things that result from these unhealthy coping skills and these unhealthy survival strategies that they have been presented with. And so I think that something that's really missing in the education system is a trauma-informed approach to what are kids really dealing with nowadays, because it's not like it was, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that's not to say that kids didn't have struggles back then, like when we were kids or when our parents were kids, but kids really deal with some crap now, like some serious, serious stuff. And with social media and the internet and all these things that, were kind of just becoming available, when we were like high school age, that now kids grow up with from birth.
Oh, yeah.
And there are all these new mechanisms, whereas used to, when you got off the bus and you came home, your bully couldn't bother you anymore. Well, now they can bother you 24 hours a day.
And then on a grander platform.
Yeah, on a huge platform that everyone can see.
Because, growing up, the most we had as far as social media, MySpace, and then you had the chats like
right.
AOL Instant Messenger,
right.
ICQ, but that's
right.
it. You could just block in there and you're done with them.
Right,
or
yeah.
have your mom pick up the phone, or you just pick up the phone.
Right.
Internet goes out. But.
Right. Yeah, and that's it, But now it's 24-hour exposure to whatever, and like, for example, with our youngest kids at home that are 7 and about to be 9, we had to ban Roblox from our home because, with our youngest boy who's about to turn 9, he was being bullied by grown adults and having horrible things said to him in a children's game. And with our 7-year-old daughter, one day we found her inside of, because in Roblox, people can build games within the game. We found her in a game where all the players were standing inside of a bathroom peeing on each other.
I've heard some really jacked up things about Roblox. I've taken my kid off there before.
Yeah.
But I've also made it where he's not able to really talk to anybody outside.
Right.
He doesn't understand it the way we do.
Right.
But I will tell you what, though, get in a Call of Duty lobby,
Mm-hmm.
let one of those 12-year-olds, 8-year-olds talk to you.
Man.
And oh my God.
Savage. Like Lord of the Flies has nothing on the Call of Duty chat.
Like it's Lord of the Flies, Dante's Inferno. And
They'll tell you things they did to your mother.
it's like, how the hell do you even know about that?
Like, I'm having to get on Urban Dictionary to even figure out exactly what that insult meant. I'm like, oh my God, that's what he meant? Oh.
Did he call me an idiot? Like, you little son of a bitch.
Yeah, and then I'm like, man, I can't play Call of Duty anymore because of that.
And the worst part is half those little bastards are better than us.
Well, and that's the other thing is like, if you really want to get an ego check, play any first-person shooter against a 12-year-old.
But then I'm sitting there going, let's go pick up a paintball gun. Let's use real military
I mean,
tactics.
that's a whole other ball game there, But when it comes to video games, man, they'll run circles around you and make you feel real bad about it, for sure. Yeah, our 14-year-old boy, he really likes Arena Breakout, and I was playing that with him for a while, and he was just running circles around me. I'm like, man, I can't even keep up.
Well, I have to humble my 4 kids, or 3 kids, 4, yes, every now and then, because they get a little shit talky. I'm like, all right, let's go load up some Halo. We're gonna put it in multiplayer.
Right.
Oh, well, you're beating us because you got the eldest over in there. No, I'll put all y'all against me. Still smoke the shit out of them. It's like, how'd you know where I was? Dude, I've been playing this game since Iraq, since it came out.
Yeah. Back when you took the Xboxes and actually plugged a LAN cable into them. Yeah.
Up to 4 Xboxes, 16 players.
Yep. Those were the days.
Those were glorious. I miss those.
That was like the golden age.
The Blockbuster years.
Yeah, the Blockbuster years, exactly, when you would go and rent, Medal of Honor or whatever and just play it through for, 3 days or whatever your rental period was and just play it and play it and play it and then take it back.
Or you just have one of those sleepovers where it lasts like 3 days. You rent the game. By the time it goes back, it's already messed up, played through.
Yeah, you've played the game all the way through and scratched the disc, and you just hope they don't notice.
Rubbed a little toothpaste on it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was the trick. Rub toothpaste on it and hope they don't notice. But yeah, that was those were definitely the days. For sure. Yeah. So yeah, was a teacher for a while, and then when I decided that the public school system wasn't exactly where I wanted to be, because what I really wanted to do was not even necessarily teach a specific subject, although I really enjoy science and history. But what I wanted to impart was skills that people can use and critical thinking to kind of like really evaluate things, because I think that that's one thing we're really lacking in our education system in America is basic critical thinking skills. Because with standardized testing, which I wish they would do away with, what you end up doing is a lot of rote memorization just long enough to regurgitate that onto a test without ever really gaining any true understanding of the concepts. It's just like parrot back these words in this order so that we can check the block and the federal government will continue to give us this money.
While we take away shop class and stuff that can actually...
Shop class, home ec, any of those things.
Well, they need to have a class just for like life skills, balancing your checkbook, bank account, debit card, credit card usage, APR. I mean,
yeah, and some school districts, to their credit, are doing classes like that, and some individual states are starting to mandate some of these things because they're recognizing that there's a severe lack of that skill in younger people. But that ship turns very slowly, and as long as you have mandated standardized testing, you will have mandated standardized education. And education is not a one-size-fits-all concept. If you've met one kid, you've met one kid. Every kid learns different. Some kids have to touch it to understand it. Some kids need to see it. Some kids need to hear it. Some kids need to hear it 3 times.
Some need all 3.
Some kids need all of it. I mean, that's just the way it is. And until we can really get a good handle on grouping kids by how they need to learn, I think we're going to continue to struggle, because handing out letter grades and, just going grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way up, do you pass, do you get held back, is a system that is not working for us. It needs a redesign, which is a whole rabbit hole that I'm not going to go down, because I don't claim to have the answer. I just know that what we're doing right now isn't working, which is why we don't have our kids in public school. And my oldest daughter, who's about to be 20, has not been, well, she's graduated now, but stopped going to public school during COVID. And we switched to, an online program, to where I didn't have to homeschool from scratch and reinvent the wheel, but it was functionally a program that enabled homeschooling. And she did really well with that. And our 4 other kids, are all, private school. Our 17-year-old actually just graduated, but the other 3 are still in private school. And we prefer it that way, not because we're snobs or elitists or have any kind of particular ideology. It's just simply that we don't trust the public education system with our children's development and safety.
It's like once you see how the Big Mac's made, you don't want a Big Mac.
Yeah, exactly. Once you see how the sausage is made, no more. Yeah, so I moved on from the public education system, to working in nonprofit. Started out doing nonprofit kind of in an educational sort of sphere, and then later moved into working with veterans specifically, which was kind of where I had my aha moment of finally figuring out a direction in life and feeling like I had a sense of purpose, which I haven't 100% completely dialed in, but knowing that working with other veterans and helping other veterans through the same struggles that I've had, and the struggles that I continue to have, and being honest with the fact that I am no different from you, other than maybe I'm a few miles ahead of you in this walk.
Or even a few miles behind.
Or a few miles behind, as the case may be. Staying humble about it, but just being like, here's what I know, take it for what it's worth. If what you're doing isn't working, maybe try this kind of thing. Or even just being there to hear what it is that they need to get off their chest. And got into peer support, working with other veterans, worked with other veterans in a nonprofit capacity, and then worked with the VA for a little while before I came down to Texas. And now, have decided to finally use my GI Bill, to get some more credentials on my resume, and sort of am still figuring out the exact direction that I want to go, but knowing that working with other veterans and helping other veterans is definitely what kind of gives me a specific sense of purpose, other than obviously being a husband and a father and all of those things. And I would never downplay those roles in my life, because they're very important roles, that I both take very seriously and also value deeply. But in terms of like in the bigger picture of like, what am I contributing to society and my community, is to give back and to help other veterans who are struggling. And so that's kind of the direction that I'm moving in. And with that, I think one of the things that I've discovered, that I seem to be very adept at, that is helpful to people, is finding all the resources, figuring out who's who and what's what. And then in the course of just random conversations that I have when I encounter people and they happen to mention, it's like, oh, I really need this, or I wish I could figure out how to do that, or whatever that is, and going, I know somebody that does that.
There's an organization.
There's an organization for that, or I know a guy, or I know a gal, and making those connections. And really what it's about is doing, a warm handoff. It's not just, hey, here's a phone number or a website, go find them. It's, I'm going to reach out to this person and I'm going to tell them that you're going to contact them and they're going to be expecting you, so that they know that you're coming, and doing those handoffs. And it's something that I really am trying to get more people to understand, especially, in talking to folks with the VA or the Veterans Commission or whatever organization, because all of these folks are really well-meaning for the most part, and want to help. And some of them are veterans and understand the veteran experience, and some of them are not. But the thing that I'm really trying to get everybody to understand and be on the same page about is just because a resource exists doesn't mean that it's necessarily accessible to the people that need it.
Yeah.
Availability versus accessibility. And, sometimes accessibility means can they physically get there? In a place like Houston, something being 10 miles away, if you don't drive, might as well be 100 miles away. It doesn't matter because you can't get there.
Well, it takes an hour and a half to even drive across Houston. You could still be in Houston an hour and a half later.
Exactly. And if you don't have reliable transportation, the fact that that resource exists on the other side of Houston, it might as well be on Mars.
Yeah, because you no good whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, accessibility can also mean, do I understand how to navigate the process to get this thing? Can I work my way through whatever the application is that I have to fill out? Do I know who I need to call? Do I know where I need to go? All of these things, because just because the thing exists doesn't mean that people know how to get to it or what they need to do, or, what paperwork do I need to be prepared to provide. I mean, obviously, if you're a veteran, you can pretty much expect that, most people are going to want to see your DD-214.
Yeah.
That's kind of an intuitive, that one's a given. But depending on the organization, they might want other information, or they might have other criteria, some screen by your discharge status, for example, which is a whole other ball of wax, because what resources are available to a veteran who has, a discharge that's something other than honorable, because we don't know what their story was when they got discharged, or what exactly happened, or how that, came to be, especially with, veterans from past eras. There were unfortunately a lot of really bad leaders in the Vietnam era and stuff like that, and a lot of people didn't get a fair shake in their discharge, and they don't know how to navigate a discharge upgrade. They might not even know that that's an option.
Yeah. I mean, hell, I didn't know that you could actually upgrade your disability percentage for the longest time.
Right.
I thought I was stuck at 30% forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And what paperwork to fill out, or knowing that if you're thinking about applying for VA disability, or upgrading your VA disability, or applying for an additional condition, that you should fill out the paperwork for intent to file.
Yeah, that intent to file is the big one. And
right.
We've said that before on the show, is that the intent to file is the first thing, basically.
Right, because that puts that pin in the calendar that says, okay, you've declared that you intend to file this, so when you get your paperwork in, and, hopefully, fingers crossed, when that comes through as approved, we backdate the payment to that date, as opposed to, the date that it got approved.
Or the 3 months later that you actually
or the 3 months later that you filed, or the, almost a year later, because an intent to file is good for 12 months. So if you don't get around to filing for 8, 9, 10 months, that's a lot of back pay.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you get bumped by, 20 or 30% from what you were, you might be looking at a chunk of money that you left laying on the table, because you didn't know that you could even do that one simple form that, backdates that countdown clock. And so there's a lot going on there where veterans need subject matter experts in how to be a veteran.
Yeah.
Which is a wild concept.
Well, because there's no playbook for it.
No.
Once you get out, it's just like, bye, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. The way I describe it is, once you ETS, or you get medically discharged, or whatever the circumstances are, that you are exiting service, it's like, don't let the door hit you, see you never.
Mm-hmm.
On the best day, they might put you through 1 or 2 days of yellow ribbon, and you get death by PowerPoint with a bunch of information that you cannot possibly absorb.
In a hot room while you're trying to stay awake.
Right, exactly. And it's like, what was that person said about, form such and such? I don't remember, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, resource navigators are desperately needed in the veteran world. And I'm not here to criticize any VSO organization. I'm absolutely not here to do that, because there are very good, very well-meaning people at DAV and VFW and the State Veterans Commission and all of these places. There are lots of really good people who mean well. But despite all of their well-meaning, there are still far too many people that are slipping through the cracks. And year after year after year, the VA and the DOD and the federal government and various state agencies and even, municipal agencies, because, like, for example, Harris County has a very large veterans support organization, and it's full of really good people, and the director's an awesome guy. But people slip through the cracks because all of the circumstances that veterans are facing are what adds up to that 22 a day number. It's not just that veterans are super sad and so they choose to end their lives. It's that veterans are trying to survive, and they're trying to navigate all these complex things that they don't have the skill set to navigate, because they joined the military when they were 17 or 18 years old, and they served somewhere between 4 and 40 years. And when you get in, they absolve you of all of those things. Where, like, you don't have to think about what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat it, what utensil you're going to eat it with, where you're going to sleep, when you're going to sleep, any of that stuff. You don't fill out a job application. You don't write a resume. You don't fill out an application for a lease. You don't have to know how to get your utilities turned on.
You don't have to sit there and, oh man, I had one, but I mean, they do a lot of the paperwork, your S2, S3. If you need something, go get it. I mean, you don't have to, taxes you do with H&R Block and crap, or on base.
Right. Yeah, exactly. On base. And they basically just, it's like, okay, give me your DFAST stuff, and then here you go, you're done.
And most of it, even with the medical, you don't even have to pay for the medical. It's all set up for you where you don't have to do anything.
Right.
And when you get out, it's almost like you're fucking helpless.
Well, you are in a lot of ways, and it's unfortunately an acquired helplessness, not through, any fault of your own, but because you signed on the dotted line and you raised your right hand, and then you agreed to become really good at one specific thing, because that's what we need you to do. Mm-hmm. We need you to be the very best cog in this big machine that you can be. And unfortunately, when that cog gets pulled out of the machine and tossed into the bin, that cog can't cog anymore.
Yeah.
The cog doesn't know how to be a pencil or anything else. It knows how to be the cog that it was trained to be in the great big machine that is, the Department of Defense, or I guess the Department of War now. Yeah. Whatever they want to call it this week. But in an interesting and sort of ironic sense, there's that scripture about swords into plowshares. That's a lot easier said than done when the sword is a human being. Mm-hmm. Can it be done? Yes, but it takes time and it takes resources. And when you go from having everything taken care of for you, except for that one thing they expect you to do, to all of a sudden you've got to not only remember that I have to pay my light bill and pay my rent and, do all these things, but you have to know how to do them. One of the things that was a huge struggle for me was, after almost a decade, and let's face it, I got in as I was coming out of college. I was not an adult. College doesn't make you an adult.
No, it actually kind of reverts
a little bit. It kind of reverts you a little bit, but I came out of basically spending the first decade of my adult life being really good at one specific thing, and I not one time ever had to think about what I was going to wear to work. So when I got my first professional big boy civilian job, where you had to wear like business attire to come to the office, and then it's like, now I got to remember that, brown shoes and a brown belt, because you can't wear a black belt with brown shoes or vice versa. And this color tie only goes with that color shirt. And, black pants or gray pants go with these color shirts. But if you've got, khaki pants, then you need to wear a brown belt. what?
Oh, you must unbutton the bottom button if you sit down, or you can unbutton everything. And
all
then
these things. All these things you have to remember.
That's why I didn't like the business world.
Right.
I have no business etiquette.
Yeah, and so it's all this stuff you have to remember, and it's this whole other culture that you don't know how to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a little microcosm of it, because the thing is that there is no class at the end of military service on how to civilian or how to human.
Mm-hmm.
Because the military doesn't teach you how to do any of those things.
No, far from it.
Like you're basically a living, breathing implement of war. Regardless of what your job was, I mean, your job in the military might have been to, flip burgers or pump gas, but you are still, nonetheless, a component of that larger organization that does one thing, and that is armed conflict.
Well, I mean, basically, your primary job is always being a rifleman.
Right. You're an infantryman first.
Yeah, your secondary job is whatever they assign to you.
Yeah, exactly. And in the Army and the Marines, they'll definitely tell you that very explicitly. Is like you're an infantryman first, and then you're whatever, your MOS is. I don't necessarily know what they tell people in the Navy. Is like it's your job to be very buoyant or something.
Oh, well, I would say, it's your job to learn how to swim, but there's actually a lot of people in the Navy that don't know how to swim, which amazes me.
That is pretty wild. But yeah, so, and then you get out and you're in this big wide world full of a lot of people who do not have any frame of reference for your lived experience. And, and then you get into the weird, awkward, double-edged sword of how do you react to people when they say things like thank you for your service, and what does that actually mean? Because you don't want to be rude or ungrateful to those people, because on the one hand, typically when someone says thank you for your service, that's like a heartfelt gesture, but also at the same time, it's like that thing that you learn to say because you don't know what to say. Just like, when you find out someone's grandma died and you say, I'm so sorry for your loss, because that's the thing in our culture that we say to people when they're going through that. But what does that actually mean?
Well, and I've gone over this one before, because my wife was killed in Afghanistan. People are always like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Did you know her?
Right.
What makes you sorry about it? What could you have done?
Right.
I get the sentiment.
Yeah.
I don't want to fucking hear it.
Right. Yeah. And so that is the rub of, like, you don't want to alienate people further from the veteran population, right? So you don't want to react poorly when people say thank you for your service, but also you have to navigate like this very complex mixture of thoughts and feelings that are going on inside of you every time someone says that. And you just kind of have to sort of smile and nod and say, well, thank you, or I appreciate that, or whatever kind of, platitude that you give back. And so, and I think veterans will understand this, but civilians might think I sound like a jerk, but I'm going to express this because it's very genuine. It sort of becomes the veteran's job to make the civilian feel better about the fact that they feel awkward around a veteran, which is burdensome in ways.
Well, I mean, it's like being low income and going to meet a billionaire or something. They're like, oh, I'm sorry for your living condition.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Cool. But like, what do you, like, can you maybe help a brother out?
1%? Like, I'll even take a 0.5%.
Right.
That's like,
yeah,
what,
like,
change to you?
Elon Musk, if you want to, give me a Tesla, I'm here. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so that there are these complexities, like, because a lot of people, know what they see in the media, and they know what they see in movies and things like that, and so they understand. Like, a lot of people are aware of the statistic of 22 a day. A lot of people are aware that there are many, many, many unhoused veterans. A lot of people are aware that a great number of veterans have PTSD or traumatic brain injuries or common conditions associated with military service. But what a lot of people are not aware of and have no real frame of reference for or way to really compute is that there are a lot of other complex things that veterans face every day that there's really no way for us to explain to them. Because unless you've sort of lived it and experienced it, you know, you would just about have to write a book to even get the concept out there.
Well, I mean, and it's hard because, you know, there are times where, you know, certain sounds, certain smells, even certain songs, anything.
Yeah.
You could be having the best day of your life.
Right.
One smell can just completely demoralize and demolish you.
Right.
And it's hard to explain that to someone. It's like, what's wrong with you? I smelled Salisbury steak and eggs.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Well, so
yeah, and then there's this long story behind Salisbury steak and eggs, and really what it is the like neuroscience of memory, and that, you know, for whatever reason, you know, smells are one of the like strongest triggers for memories. You know, why that is, I couldn't tell you. I know that that's a fact. And that's just like one small example, but, you know, to your point, you hear a song or somebody says a specific phrase, or you smell the certain smell, or the door slams too loud, or somebody talks to you in a certain tone of voice when you're already struggling that day, and then the spiral starts. And then you are trying to contain that and also continue to function. And what is normally not that big of a deal becomes a big deal all of a sudden. And you don't even have the energy to explain it to someone, even if they're there and they care about you and they want to support you. And you're just like, God, I wish I could figure out some way to just like sum this up for you in a way that you would understand, but I just don't even have the energy or the words.
And then they kind of sometimes could possibly get mad at you because you're like,
sure. Or they feel rejected. And understandably so, you know, because like, again, almost stereotypically, like it's our tendency to like isolate, right? Like when I'm struggling and I can't person on a particular day, like I'm going to try to avoid interaction as much as possible, because what I'm doing is damage control. Because I know I'm a hot mess, and I know that despite my best efforts and intentions, what might come out my mouth is not what I want to express to people that I love and care about. But, you know, what's going on inside my brain is like, you know, trying to keep a 50 cal from cooking off when the barrel's too hot. Like you can't just like blow on it a little and fix the problem.
It'll be okay. Have some hot tea.
Right, exactly.
Oh, buy me a fucking punching bag right this moment at least. At least I can take some aggression out. But
sure.
I mean,
yeah, and that's the thing too, is that like having healthy outlets for things like aggression and frustration is really important, but also just having the knowledge of self to understand your own triggers, much less for anybody else to understand them, and then to be self-aware enough to know, like, what is my level of anxiety, or what is my level of frustration, or how close am I to kind of like acting out of, you know, whatever thing is actually going on inside of me. Because if I'm not aware of it, I surely can't expect anybody else to be aware of it. And if I don't understand it, how can I expect anyone else to understand it? And that's this whole other really complex skill set that it takes a long time to learn and an even longer time to master, you know, which makes me think of another interesting story. Like not long after I got out and I was really lost, and I was, you know, coping in really, really unhealthy ways. And I just happened to meet this guy who lived in the same area that I lived in at the time. And he was a blacksmith. And from early on in my childhood, you know, my dad's a big Civil War buff, and we lived in Missouri, and we went to Branson and went to Silver Dollar City. And I liked watching the blacksmith, and I liked seeing those kinds of things, historical reenactments and stuff. And that stuck with me. And this guy happened to be a blacksmith, and he sized me up really quick. He's like, you need something to do with your hands. And he told me, he's like, look, I can't employ you, I can't pay you, but if you'll spend what free time you have to spare and do some work for me, I'll teach you as much as I can teach you. And so I ended up spending the better part of 2 or 3 years, some evenings and some time on the weekends and things like that, just going out to a shop and beating on things with a hammer, and it was extraordinarily therapeutic, especially in a time of my life where I felt completely directionless.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me something to look forward to and a sense of purpose. And that's sort of what motivated me to want to do some work with Tim Stroud and to work with Stay Tuned for Vets, was that they kind of had the same basic idea, is that creative pursuits are a vehicle for dealing with stuff that you can't necessarily deal with just by talking about it, because sometimes you need other forms of expression, or you need a way to just do something with your hands, or to move your body in some kind of a way to like get that out, and there's all kinds of psychology books and like The Body Keeps the Score and stuff like that will sort of bear out the scientific side of that. But what it really boils down to is all of our stress and all of our trauma and all of our worry and anxiety and all those things like have effects on our body, not just our brains. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't do something with our bodies, in addition to, going and sitting down and talking to a therapist, which I'm not knocking, there's a place for that, but also there's like other forms of therapeutic pursuits that are equally valid and equally important. Mm-hmm. And whether you discover that is martial arts or running marathons or, underwater basket weaving or expressive dance or whatever that thing is, something to do with your hands or something to do to get that energy out of your body is just as important as how do you deal with what's going on inside your brain.
I think a lot of it has to do with getting so comfortable with an activity that you can do it almost by muscle memory. So you're separating your physical body and your mental aspects, and then you can, while you're doing this, you can start thinking about this, and then you can start maybe even processing through it all. I mean,
yeah, and that's exactly it. Matter of fact, in one of my recent classes in school, in studying recreational therapy, I was reading some studies about what they call flow state, and how when you're doing an activity that you both enjoy and find satisfying and also have developed a certain level of skill at, you get into what's called flow state, which is exactly what you're describing, where you don't have to necessarily consciously think about what your hands or your feet or your body are doing, because you've developed that muscle memory to the point that your body can do the thing, and your brain can kind of take a step back from being in the driver's seat, and that's when you start to process stuff. And so there's actual psychology and actual medical science and neuroscience behind that idea, and whether what you enjoy is woodworking or golf or driving rally cars or pig farming or whatever it is, when you get to that point where your brain can kind of disconnect from what your body is doing and let your body go on muscle memory, that's when you start to process some of that heavy stuff that's been going on in the back of your brain the whole time. It's just like how it's important to hit REM stage sleep, because some of the heavy lifting that your brain does to process what's going on in your subconscious happens during sleep. The same thing with flow state or daydreaming. So those creative mental states are really important as therapeutic modalities, is what it really boils down to. And so the gist of recreation therapy is just that. We figure out what people enjoy and we give them a supportive environment to do it where they can feel safe and maybe start to bring that level of hypervigilance down in the case of veterans, because pretty much all veterans are hypervigilant on some level. And so if you can put them in an environment where they don't feel hypervigilant and they're starting to just do the thing that they're doing and being present in the moment and being grounded in the environment and coming back to baseline, that's when they can then start to process what's going on inside of them. And you can go down the rabbit hole of talking about the vagus nerve and, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system and coming out of fight or flight back into rest and digest. And the funniest thing in the world that's not actually funny at all is how many veterans have gastric issues like irritable bowel syndrome. And, people might assume it's like, well, it's because you spent however many years of your life not chewing your food. No, that's not it. It's because you spent however many years in fight or flight and your digestive system has been so disrupted that it doesn't remember how to do its job.
Yeah. And I think that's also why you see so many veteran programs that are in a group aspect, because when you have more than one veteran around you, your fight or flight goes down a little bit.
Right.
You have 3, it goes down a little bit more, depending on what you're doing. Like, as long as it's an activity where you can separate your brain and body in a way.
Right.
And the more you have, you don't worry about the fight or flight because they got you and you got them, but you all start relaxing. So instead of just one guy suffering, you got 5 people that are kind of a lot more calmer and a lot better off than they were when they got there.
Right, exactly. And it's also interesting too, from a sociological perspective or an anthropological perspective, that human beings are wired to be social and to interact in small groups. And so, and you can read books like Sebastian Junger's book Tribe, and it talks about when we do things in groups that are very close and we have a very solid relationship and a solidarity in that we share this idea, we share these values, we share these beliefs, and this is the thing we do. And they sort of develop what, for lack of a better word, rituals around that. And, kind of how the author of that book, Sebastian Junger, came to start forming this idea, and he later wrote it into a book, was that, as an embedded journalist with the military in Afghanistan, he kind of watched and observed groups of soldiers and military service members and how they interacted with each other and how they supported each other. And then later he got interested in what happens to them after they leave service and why does everything kind of fall apart. And then he started to do a deep dive into what happened in the past, because like the profession of arms is as old as time. Ever since we had sticks and rocks, there have been warriors in societies. And so what was different about groups of people in the past as opposed to now, and why didn't, Aborigines or Native American tribes or people in the Amazon jungle, or take your pick, the ancient Celtic warriors, whoever, why didn't they have these high instances of things like PTSD like what we have now? And he formed this idea. It's because, well, they had these rituals and these observances that they did before, during, and after military.
But also, I would think a lot of that is during those times when you left, you came back to the same area. You came back to your same tribe and stuff. Here,
right,
where you can come to Houston and you won't know anybody.
Right. Yeah.
Or go up to Minnesota.
Yes.
And you're screwed. You're nowhere in your element.
Exactly. And that was a key part in his book and other studies that have been done since then. And you're exactly right, because the warriors in all these, societies left from their village. They were given a specific type of send-off. They were prepared in a certain sort of way. You can, as much as it's kind of goofy and Hollywoodish, there's a scene in the movie 300 that kind of encapsulates this. And it does actually, in a certain way, portray something that really did happen in ancient Sparta, where, the wives would tell the husbands, come back with your shield or on it. But what it was really trying to portray, and did so in just a very brief scene, was this idea that there was this send-off. And then you went and did the thing that you did. And when you came back, there were these other rituals and ceremonies and things that happened, and you were received back by the same society that sent you off.
Yes.
And there was a support system there. And that's what we lack. And that's where the post-traumatic stress comes in, because you don't come back to a safe and supportive environment of familiar people and familiar things that allows you to process in a timely manner.
Well, that'd be like Caesar going to fight the Gauls and then retiring to Sparta.
Right. It wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
It would not have worked because the environment is not familiar. The people are not familiar. They don't necessarily look or act like you.
They don't have an investment.
They don't have an investment in your well-being. They're just other people just going through the motions of everyday life. And you're just, to use a military term, lost in the sauce, and so that then begs the question of how do we as a modern society that is like population and geographically speaking, a massive super state, the United States of America spans a continent. It's huge. And we sort of have this shared identity around these certain core ideas and values, and we all speak some version of the English language for the most part, and, say the Pledge of Allegiance and all these good things. But when it comes to the fact that you enter military service and you leave military service, like, it doesn't matter where you went to MEPS or what your first duty station was. Like, you walk out the front gate or you get on a bus or you get a plane ticket and you go to wherever. Maybe you go home if you've got a home to go to and, the cornfields of Kansas or the inner city of Chicago or wherever you came from. But in a lot of cases, you don't. And in a lot of cases, you can't. And so how do we then bridge that gap where there's some safety net for brand new veterans who are transitioning service members can then be received into that and have that reintegration, because that's really what it's about, is that reintegration period and that process of reintegration, because that's critical.
Well, I think one really good program is if you get veterans who've been out for 10 years, let's say. They've been out for 10 years. Any guy getting out of the military goes into being received in a mentorship program.
Right.
A 10-year veteran can probably teach you the ropes quite well, especially with the, disability, all your different paperwork, how to go with the VA. So.
Right. And some places are kind of moving in that direction a little bit. Peer support programs are gaining traction, and I think that is a key element of it. And having gone through peer support training myself, I can attest to the fact that it does help. But what we need is like a more robust system behind that. And it's not just, well, here's a guy you can sit and talk to that kind of understands your problems and might give you some pointers. Like, we need a system by which you have all the resources you need to transition from what you did before to whatever comes next. And the GI Bill is great. And, VA home loan guarantee is great. But what we don't have is a system to actively reintegrate transitioning service members back into civilians. And until we have that, we will continue to just kind of beat our heads against the wall with these same problems. And, the VA and the DOD have thrown tons of money at very ineffective solutions. And I'm not saying that as a dig. I'm saying that from a practical standpoint. You can go and look at the money they've spent and the programs they've spent it on. And what are the results? Has the number gone down? No. It appears to be going up. It might take a dip for a year or two, just a few percentage points here and there. But for the most part, if you look at the long-term trend, the graph largely stays the same or even is kind of on an upward trend. And you can't solve the problem with people in white coats sitting there asking you what your problems are. Is that a component? Yes. Is there a place for that? Yes. But what they really need is support. And it's not just talk therapy, and it's not just here, take these pills. And it's not here, we'll put you in a temporary housing program that will pay your rent for a couple of months, and then you'll be right back to square one because you haven't learned any kind of like skills to get yourself any further along in the interim time. We've got to encapsulate all of that stuff into one program that has a structure that gets you from A to Z instead of a bunch of little compartmentalized things that kind of try to take little bits and pieces of that overarching problem and solve them independently. It's like the old adage of the blind guys trying to describe the elephant. If you're touching the ear or the trunk or the tail or the leg, you don't see the whole picture. And it's much like that, solving this sort of enigma of how do we help veterans reintegrate into civilian society, is that we need to treat the whole problem as a whole problem, not as a bunch of individual symptoms.
It's good coffee.
Yeah, my wife's a big coffee drinker. I'm more of a tea guy. I do appreciate veteran-owned businesses, though, and I think that more veterans would do well to go into business for themselves in some way or another. Something that I've felt strongly about for a while now is that veterans make great candidates for lots of types of small business, and specifically one that I'm passionate about is agriculture. Veterans are ideal to be farmers because in the military, you're out in all kinds of weather, you're exposed to the elements, you get up early, you work long hours, it's physically demanding, you have to a lot of times be self-directed, and manage a lot of different things at once, which is all the stuff that a farmer does.
Yeah.
And realistically, our country needs farmers. Farmers are aging out, much like skilled tradesmen, aging out of the business. I think the average age of farmers is something like 55, somewhere in that ballpark. And a lot of family farms are shutting down because all the kids and grandkids moved off to the city and got jobs doing this, that, or the other thing, which is not to fault them, but it's also unfortunate because, if you've got a farm that's been in the family and established for however long, and then there's no one to take it over, that takes that food production out of play when that farmer retires. And I think that a lot of veterans would do well to consider agriculture as a pursuit because you get to be your own boss. It's high risk, high reward, but we're kind of used to that.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of programs that support it. There are programs within the USDA that either are specifically to support veterans getting into agriculture or have some form of like a veteran's preference, like FSA loans, EQIP loans, those kinds of things. If you check that little box that says I'm a veteran, it weights your application.
It opens the door a little.
Yeah, it opens the door a little, things like that. And there are also a surprising number of programs that exist that assist veterans in becoming farmers and train them to become farmers. One that is excellent is run by Texas A&M University Extension, which is called Battleground to Breaking Ground. Yep. It's an excellent program. So if you're a veteran that lives in Texas and you want to get into farming, definitely reach out to those folks. A program that operates throughout the country on a rotating schedule throughout the year is a program called Armed to Farm. Mm-hmm. They are out of Fayetteville, Arkansas, but they do workshops all over the country. And I've had the privilege of attending 3 of their workshops and hosting one. And the folks that run that are excellent. And they also do virtual seminars and things like that to sort of fill in the gaps in between or to kind of keep you up to date or just to answer questions, things like that once you go through those initial trainings. And the cool thing about it is when you finish these courses, they give you these certificates of completion, which are things that you can put into your new I Want to Be a Farmer, I Love Me book, just like you used to keep in the military. And you bring those certificates with you when you go to apply for USDA loans and things like that as part of your pedigree of here is how I have educated myself and acquired this skill set to sort of legitimize yourself as a beginner farmer.
Yeah.
And so it's a win-win situation because most of these resources are very free, either low cost or free. And so you don't have to come up with a bunch of money to get this training because they're typically grant funded. And so the cost is minimal, if any. And so it's just yours for the taking. And so if there's any, veteran listeners of the podcast that are thinking about going into agriculture, definitely look up those resources. And then in terms of small business in general, the Small Business Administration also has programs that specifically help veterans that want to develop a business. They'll help you do things like write a business plan, and they do business loan guarantees, kind of like the VA home loan, where they don't give you the loan, but they'll help you get the loan.
Yeah.
Things of those nature. In the state of Texas specifically, the Texas Veterans Commission, the Texas Workforce Commission have supplemental programs on top of that as well, and resources that help veterans who want to become self-employed in some capacity, and also, additional resources to help you find education if you're looking to acquire a specific skill set, things like that. And then, of course, there's your GI Bill, which can be used in a number of creative ways, to include OJT. A lot of people don't realize that if the place that you're working is set up for it, you can use your GI Bill to get on the job training. Also, if you're going through VRNE, there's a self-employment track to VRNE where they support you in becoming self-employed in kind of a similar fashion to the OJT track of the GI Bill, where instead of let's enroll you in a school and we'll pay your tuition, it's what sort of business do you want to build, or what kind of skilled trade do you want to go into business for yourself as, and how do we help you get that skill set and then acquire the tools and the required licenses and things of that nature. So for many veterans, they think, well, I've got this GI Bill, but I don't really want to go to college. College isn't for me. You don't have to go to college. You can become a welder. You can become a farmer. You can become a business person. Options are many. And so I definitely encourage those veterans out there that haven't used their GI Bill or maybe considering applying for VRNE to at least ask questions regarding those options, because not everybody needs to go and get a 4-year degree or go back and get another degree. If you've got some burning passion for making products or selling a service or becoming a skilled tradesman or a farmer or what have you, those options are out there.
I mean, in between the GI Bill, here in Texas, the Hazelwood Act,
right?
You got the Pell Grant. I mean, there's no excuse not to get the education for the job or the program you want to do.
Absolutely. And think creatively. Thinking outside the box will get you everywhere. Maybe what you really like is currently some hobby that you have that you just haven't realized you could turn into an occupation. Like, if you want to be a full-time knife maker, or, you really love tabletop gaming and you want to get a 3D printer and sell miniatures or sell resin poured dice or whatever that thing is, Christmas trees made out of pallet wood, whatever it is, the world's your oyster. It's just a matter of finding what it is that you love to do and then, generating income out of that. Because let's face it, most of the time, 9-to-5 jobs are not the bailiwick of most veterans. And we discover that, and I'll speak from my own experience and from experiences that many people have shared with me. When you get out, you bounce from job to job to job because you're very dissatisfied, and civilians don't understand you. And the civilian workplace doesn't have the same kind of, shall we say, candor that the military workplace had.
Well, I mean, and it's one of those things that I try to live by is the old adage, do what you love, not love what you do.
Right.
If you do what you love and not love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Right.
And,
exactly.
That's like with this podcast. I don't really work a day in my life, but I'm in here 12, 13, 14 hours a day busting my ass. But
Right.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is like, you can end your day every day worn out and dissatisfied and unfulfilled, or you can end your day every day worn out and satisfied and fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a matter of making choices. Now, will it require some sacrifice up front? Probably. Will you have, a period of time in your life where you have to watch your budget very closely and really scrape by? Likely.
Is it worth it?
Is it worth it? Absolutely.
Yes. Because, I mean, not only that, if you can do a job that you love, your family life will change too.
Right.
And it'll be a happier family life. Because if you're coming home from work miserable all day long, bitching to your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, boyfriend, whatever, they're going to get tired of it.
Right.
And then they already got their own problems if they're working a job.
Right.
And heaven forbid you both are fucking veterans.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very valid point, because the thing is like, if you go to work every day to a job that just hollows you out, and you come home and you're already on empty and you've got nothing for your family, that's really going to affect your home life and your family dynamic.
And it just compounds after that.
It does. It just compounds because, your kids expect that dad's going to come home grumpy, so they don't greet you at the door anymore. And your wife just expects you to be cantankerous when you get home, and so she doesn't greet you at the door anymore. And then all of a sudden you feel like the stranger in your own home because you work a soul-sucking job that is robbing you of all of the ness that is you.
And now your family's walking on eggshells.
Right.
And then it just not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. That, the things that they love and admire most about you are being destroyed by you not living out what your true purpose is. And by not pursuing whatever that is, or discovering whatever that is, because maybe you know and maybe you don't, but at least it behooves us to try and figure out what that is, because, no matter what your belief system is, like, we all have strengths and skills and talents that are inherent to us. And if we take the time to discover what those are, you can call it fate or destiny, or just finding something you're good at that you enjoy. But regardless of how you describe it, like, the process is the same and the outcome is the same. When you are fulfilled and what you're doing fills your bucket, then you've got something to pour out for everybody else, instead of you being on empty and expecting everybody else around you to fill you back up.
And it's a long, hard process. I mean, it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's not going to be necessarily the happiest or the easiest process. But once you get to a certain specific point, you feel a huge weight off your shoulders.
Right. Right. Exactly. And we're just not built or wired for this, like, 9-to-5 rat race, grind till you die pursuit of, and we don't even hold hard currency in our hands anymore. It's just numbers on a screen, man.
Yeah.
And, like, is that what you're going to give your whole life to, and look back when you're however old on your deathbed and go, I sure did get those numbers in my bank account, and here I am in this nursing home all alone and no one comes to see me.
I'd rather be poor on a farm running my ass off and happy than rich.
And like, rich in the truest sense of the word.
Yeah.
And someday, many years from now, when it's time for you to exit the meat vehicle, you got kids and grandkids that are standing there around you and have good memories of you, and not just a lot of memories of, dad never had time for me because he was always working.
I mean, that's why I'm very grateful, because I didn't have to necessarily work when me and my son moved down here.
Mm-hmm.
I could stay home and take care of him.
Yeah.
And, you know, that gave us a lot of time together. That got me to learn a lot about being a parent.
Right.
And yeah, it was hard on my own for a long time, but I'd never trade those days.
No, absolutely not. Were you deciding which bill to pay and which one not to pay? Maybe. Was your kid happy and you got to watch your kid be happy? And is that priceless? Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, one of our worst years, maybe 5 presents under the Christmas tree. He
Right.
didn't give a crap about the presents. He was happier with the boxes.
Right. Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
what? That's why I
Yeah.
don't buy expensive crap for kids.
Right. Because, like, it's, the smile on their face is worth more than, whatever you pay for whatever the toy is they're supposed to want that year, according to the commercials.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, they're going to play with the box more than they play with the toy, because that's the nature of kids. And understanding that is kind of one of the keys to parenting, I think, because, modern culture is designed to tell you what you should feel like you need and want and ought to be or have. But really what it all comes down to is if you don't have people in your life that you value and that value you and that you make good memories with and spend good time with and good days with, you don't have anything.
You're just going to be in a miserable life.
Right. Because you can't take any of it with you when you go, man. You can have houses and cars and a Scrooge McDuck vault full of gold bricks. It doesn't matter. Because when you're dead, that's all going to probate anyway.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of people are going to fight over it and they're all going to be mad and miserable.
Now you get to break your family up because of the damn money. And
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like all those kinds of things. It's like, now that's not to say that, people shouldn't try to leave something, for their family when they go so that they don't have to, scrounge or whatever. I'm not saying that at all, but like if your entire existence is just the pursuit of material things, that's an empty existence.
I mean, unless you're like a single person, no kids, no wife, you're making a lot of money, and then you just donate it all.
Yeah, I mean that's cool. You leave a foundation behind in your name, and then a bunch of kids can go to art school or something.
But I still feel sad because your life probably sucked.
Yeah, that's a very sad existence, and that too, to say that forming meaningful friendships and meaningful interactions with people, I think, is kind of the true spice of life, in whatever way that you choose to interact with people, whether that's volunteering in your community or you like to go to the bingo hall. Maybe you're one of those people that likes tabletop gaming and you've got your game group that you play D&D with or whatever, or you go to church, whatever that thing is. Having those meaningful interactions with people, I think is really what it's all about. Family and community. And to kind of refer back to what we were talking about earlier, that's what veterans need too, is family and community. Because you can have all the programs in the world, spend all the money there is, and if you don't have family and community, you're really not going to ever feel better about it.
Yeah.
You've got to have family and community, and that's really important. And I think that there are definitely some organizations out there that are doing good work in the area of getting veterans to kind of like not isolate and get out and do things with other veterans. And I won't speak for everywhere, but the local Wounded Warrior Project organization I'm a fan of. People say what they say about the overarching organization, and that's their right to have whatever opinion they have. But the Houston office for Wounded Warrior Project does a lot of stuff for a lot of people, and there are some really good people that work in that office. And they get people out and they get them together and they do cool stuff with them, and that's important. And there are a lot of nonprofits out there that do a lot of different things, whether that's fishing or hunting or, there are nonprofits that get, veterans together for sporting events. There's even nonprofits out there that specifically focus on helping veterans find a D&D group or an online gaming group.
Well, a few of them, because you got VetTix for tickets to anywhere.
Right, VetTix is great.
The Regiment, that's another
Regiment
good
Gaming
one.
is a good one.
Yes, they do a lot. And if you want to learn about gaming, get into gaming, that is where to go.
Yeah. Yep, Regiment is awesome.
I mean, there's so many different ones. It's just, again, having that full-fledged resource and being able to figure out what would make me happy, what do I need, and where to go.
Yeah, you've got, if you're into tabletop gaming, there's Dice of Duty. They're really cool. Dungeons and Dog Tags, also very cool. Roll to Heal is a Texas-based group. They have chapters all over the country, but that's their entire bailiwick, is just they stand up chapters where, okay, this guy is your local GM and he's setting up shop at whatever venue. Go out and play a one-shot or play a campaign. And the cool thing about what Roll to Heal is doing, and Dice of Duty also similarly, is that they have some unique training that they run their GMs through, where they're not only teaching them how to be good storytellers and how to run good games, but also teaching them about peer support and being trauma informed and things like that, and kind of how to navigate some of those things, and also when to know I should probably try to help this person find a resource for the thing that they're dealing with. And so they're not just focused on, let's get people out and, they roll some dice and they have a good time. It's also baked into the process that they are a resource hub to help people connect to what it is that they need beyond the gaming table. And so that's very admirable. And I think that's a great approach. And so those resources are out there, and I definitely applaud them for their efforts. Another really cool organization that's out there is called Plain Wellness, like PLANE, Plain Wellness. And they do woodworking classes, and a lot of them are virtual, where the instructor walks you through what the project is. And some of them are just as simple as explaining how a specific type of tool works, or how do you take care of this woodworking tool. And then other ones are for people who have access to at least some tools and the materials to make a project, and then they just walk them through the project step by step. And I think those two are very cool organizations. Or like we mentioned earlier, Stay Tuned for Vets, exposing veterans to a lot of different sort of creative outlets to express themselves, whether that's through art or theater or dance or music, or these various different creative pursuits. And all of those things have their place because different people have different needs and different interests. But what a lot of them have in common, at least the ones that are getting it right, what they have in common is that they're also behind the curtain, also referring people to resources and helping people find what they need beyond just that surface level of, come out and we're all going to paint portraits of our dogs or whatever, which is fun and cool and very good and can even be therapeutic. But also, when somebody's in the class and they're talking about how they need this thing or that thing or whatever they're struggling with, and then it's like, okay, well, we'd really like to help you. Can we refer you to this resource? And so that sort of like boots on the ground, grassroots level of advocacy and resource navigation, I think, is one of the key pieces. And that's the thing that more organizations, and to their credit, Texas Veterans Commission does a pretty good job with their grant program of supporting things like that to some degree. And I really would like to see places like the VA or Bob Woodruff Foundation, the heavy hitters with the big dollars, to really focus and really prioritize what are the resources at the community level that can help people get from A to B, and refer veterans and their family members to the resources they need. Because the VA is a huge institution, and it's very daunting and it's very difficult to navigate. And just by the nature of what it is, they kind of have to sit back and wait for people to come to them. It's hard to go out into the community and tell people, come to the VA.
Yeah.
And that's without even really broaching the subject of the fact that, you know, the VA has a certain reputation, especially with the older generations of veterans, and even with the younger veterans to some extent, because of things that have happened in the past that, you know, to varying degrees of deservedness, I guess, for lack of a better word, they have developed a reputation for not necessarily always being trustworthy. And that being said, you know, I utilize VA services all the time, and I have some really great providers at the VA. So I'm not trying to dismiss them offhand, but what I'm saying is they have to face the reality of the fact that they've got a stone to roll uphill with their reputation. And the way to get more veterans to the VA or back to the VA is through community organizations. And so if they're partnering with these organizations and they're supporting these organizations with resources and funding, they're really going to accomplish the thing that they want to accomplish. And ultimately, I think in the long term, we'll find that they're spending less money overall. Because commercials on TV and the radio and printing pamphlets and doing all these things cost a lot of money and are largely ineffective.
And they're thrown away.
Right. You know, everybody kind of just rolls their eyes when they see these commercials on TV. Like, nobody sits and goes, wow, I should really go to the VA based on this commercial I saw. But if somebody you know and trust that is a friend or a good acquaintance tells you, hey, if you go down to such and such VA clinic and talk to this specific person about this specific problem you're having, that carries weight.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the VA is going to do it like the Boy Scouts did and just change their name to try and change the reputation. They can probably get Motrin as a sponsor.
Yeah, you know, maybe they could do it NASCAR style.
Yeah. Definitely going to be Motrin, though.
Yeah. 800 milligrams at a time, as many times as you need.
I think they're banned from Percocet and Vicodin now.
Yeah, they're kind of trying to get away from that stuff, but
I wonder why.
Oh, wow.
Dicks.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. But you know, that's it's a big issue that encompasses a lot of other smaller issues, and it is going to take more than just a massive institution run by the government to help resolve these problems and help individual people. It takes community level resources.
It's going to come down to it's going to be the veterans who speak up about it and try to go, this is what we need. And it's going to be community leaders and citizens that help implement it and keep it going.
Exactly, because that's the thing with specifically nonprofits is that they have to sustain themselves somehow
for at least 2 years
and longer. I mean, you know, the thing of it is that if you want to run a nonprofit, like, the money has to come from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't come out of thin air, and some of them come up with very creative ways to do that, to their credit, and some of them even come up with ways that eventually generate funds that become self-sustaining.
Yes,
but not all of them do, or they do it to varying degrees. And so it behooves us to support the ones that are doing good work. And there are lots of ways to do that. You know, charitable giving is a great way to do that. You know, I think that more nonprofits that serve veterans specifically deserve the opportunity to take part in things like the Combined Veteran Campaign, for example. You know, anybody who served in the military remembers roundabouts November of every year, they hand you this booklet and they say, here's all the places that you can send $1 to out of every paycheck for the next year or whatever, right? ASPCA or Easter Seals or whatever. And I think that it would be really great if a lot of these veteran serving nonprofits, one, were made aware that that's a thing, because a lot of them aren't, and two, were given a little bit of a helping hand in how do they get involved with that.
Oh yeah.
Because that's a great way. Also in terms of nonprofit fundraising, Giving Tuesday is a great vehicle for small nonprofits. Every Tuesday after Black Friday in November, if you sign on to the Giving Tuesday campaign as a nonprofit, they sort of help you to promote. And it's basically like, hey, if you can go and spend a whole bunch of money on Christmas presents and commercial stuff that you probably don't really need, hey, maybe toss a few bucks to this nonprofit that's trying to help, disabled veterans or ugly dogs or whatever, sad puppies with Sarah McLachlan music.
That need cosmetic surgery.
Whatever that is that, pulls on your heartstrings the most, to go and support those things is really what it comes down to. But, on this particular platform, that's probably kind of preaching to the choir.
To an extent, but I mean, I still get to learn.
Right.
So. Well, no, I mean, it's interesting trying to find all the different donations, the different grants, the different ways. Because, I mean, right now, as far as what I've seen, a lot of businesses, like the really big grants and stuff, they won't look at you for 2 years.
Right.
You have to get established. You have to get there. So at that point, the money either comes out of your pocket or you're begging people.
Right.
But I will admit, there are a lot of great companies out there that all you have to do is submit a donation request.
Yeah.
And they're more than willing to help.
Yeah.
Some are out there that say they will help and then they don't. And then there are some that just flat out ignore you. It's their prerogative. It's their deal.
Absolutely.
But I mean, for the few businesses that have helped us, I mean, it's truly appreciated. It's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, and in that vein, I have to give a little bit of a shout out to Sam Houston Electric Cooperative, because they provided funding for us to host an intro to blacksmithing class through Stay Tuned for Vets. The stipulation being that they want to see veterans from the counties that Sam Houston Electric Cooperative serves, which is multiple counties, Liberty, Montgomery, and 5 or 6 others, which you can check out the Stay Tuned for Vets website for more information on that class upcoming on September the 12th, if you're interested. But all that to say that there are a lot of places you wouldn't quite think to look, like who thinks about their local electric company as a source of support for a nonprofit that's trying to do something good for veterans in the community. So if you think creatively, like you said, you can kind of find interesting outlets where they're looking to give back to the community, and they also understand that small local organizations need love too.
Well, you got credit unions and banks, they do it too. Right. It's not the loans and shit. Many restaurants and food places don't mind donating for events.
Absolutely.
A lot of larger places will sponsor.
Yeah.
Yeti, the cooler company, they do stuff for events and sponsorships. So, I mean, there's a lot of resources out.
Right.
Houston Zoo, they donate. Houston Space Center donates.
Yep.
The Ruckus, the Texans, the Dynamo, they all donate. I mean, there's a lot of resources. It's just get in there and don't be afraid to hear no. That's one thing I'm learning.
Absolutely.
But also understand that once they reach their contribution limit, you miss the train and you try again next year. Try again next quarter. I mean,
exactly.
It doesn't mean the door's shut on you. It's just temporary closed.
Right. And that's the thing is, like, you've got to think creatively and don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like, if you submit one grant application and you hang all your hopes and dreams on that and you don't get it, well, then you're just kind of left with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you go out there and you find all of the grants that your organization, the mission that you have or the thing that you want to focus on really aligns well with the people that they want to serve or the values of their organization, then apply for as many as you can find.
You can apply to 99 or you can apply to 100 of them. You're going to get 99 no's and most likely 1 yes. I mean,
right. Yeah.
Or you can get 12 yeses. But
yeah,
that's still a substantial amount of money to do your mission and your dream.
Exactly. And if you're talking about nonprofits specifically, there are free resources out there, online webinars on things like grant writing, and there are also free or low cost search engines that help you find grants so that you don't just have to comb through whatever your search engine of choice is from scratch. You can kind of put in, it's like, okay, my nonprofit does this and it serves this group of people. And, here's like the size of nonprofit that I have, because some of them are grants that, only serve small nonprofits or only serve large nonprofits or whatever the case may be, and helps you to filter out what's not relevant, because you can burn up a ton of time just reading the criteria for grants.
Oh yeah. And grant writers aren't cheap.
No, no, they're not cheap at all. I kind of do a little bit of freelance grant writing work, and I am by no means an expert on grant writing. I've successfully written a number of grants, and even had the privilege of serving on a couple of grant review boards to actually review other applications for grants. So having kind of a behind the scenes look on what that process looks like at the end. But the thing is that the more grants you write, the more you realize that every grant application is different.
Oh yeah.
So if you go into it thinking, I got this in the bag, and you just kind of hand wave your way through it, pencil whip the thing and turn it in, that's not the way to win.
Yeah, they're not going to look at it very nicely.
Your application needs to be relevant, and it needs to be genuine and heartfelt, because that really comes through. It's just like telling high school kids how to apply for college scholarships. It's like, you really got to sell yourself. What is it that makes you unique, and what is it about you and what you're going to do with that education, or in this case with that grant money, that makes it really worth their while to write that check on behalf of you and not somebody else. Like, what are you going to do for veterans? Or, my dream is to become a doctor and cure cancer, or, whatever the thing is, like for scholarships or grants or whatever you're applying for. What is it that makes their investment in you worthwhile, as opposed to the 100 other people that have written in and asked for that same thing?
Yeah.
And on that topic of AI. So AI is a little bit of a two-edged sword. It's a great tool, but don't rely on it exclusively, because for one, it's usually pretty obvious if you've just had AI spit something out and just copy pasted and sent it, and it comes across as very disingenuous and kind of lazy. But also, don't be afraid to use AI for what it's good at, to give you something to start from.
Yep.
Craft me a narrative about such and such, and then plug that into, Claude or Chat GPT or Grok or what have you, and then read that over and go, oh, okay, cool, that's a good point that I didn't think of, so I'm definitely going to hit that highlight or whatever, and then go ahead and then write your own narrative, but let that software do some of the heavy lifting. Just don't generate some, kind of half-baked narrative that you then submit and clog up the system, because grant reviewers are real people and they have limited time. And so if within the first couple of sentences of your grant narrative, they can see that you just had AI write it and put no effort into it, they're probably going to stop reading.
Yeah.
It does. It does. So yeah, these things are tools, but we just don't want them to become crutches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, let's say the last 10 minutes. What you need to get off your chest.
Oh man. Well, not necessarily what I need to get off my chest, but just, I guess, to put the message out there that for all the veterans that may listen to this podcast, we understand that you're probably dealing with some heavy stuff, and your life circumstances may be very difficult right now, and you may be thinking some really dark thoughts. But just know that there are people out there and there are places you can go that want to hear your story. They want to support you. They want to help you get through it. You're not alone. And you're not the only one. So if you're thinking along those lines, don't let a temporary problem drive you to an irreversible solution. Because I can speak from personal experience. I've been there. It's not a fun place to be. But no matter how bad it seems right now, there's someone out there who wants to help, who wants to hear you out, who will help connect you to what you need, and will help you get back on your feet some kind of way. So just reach out to someone, even if it's just to call 988 and talk to someone on the other end, just to get through until tomorrow so that you can go and find someone who can help you solve whatever it is that you're struggling with, whether it's money or housing or you ran out of your meds, whatever it is, someone can help you. So don't give up.
No, I agree. No, there should be no reason that we have the 22 a day statistic as high as it is. There's plenty of resources out there, plenty of people willing to give their right arm just to help somebody.
Right.
You know, as I've said it before, I'd rather, listen to you bitch to me at 2, 3 in the morning.
Right.
Than go to your funeral or read your eulogy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I may be a little agitated. You woke me up at 3 in the morning, but
right.
If it's for that reason, I wouldn't give a damn.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's too important not to say it and say it again and again, because you never know when you said it for the umpteenth time who needed to hear it that exact time. So it bears repeating.
And it may seem like something small and minuscule to you, but to somebody else, I mean, it could be their whole life.
It could be.
I've had people come on here and go, I didn't think my story was all that great. Yeah, well, your story also got 3 other people to come on here, or your story inspires somebody else. I mean, we get random messages going, oh my God, how the hell could he do this or get to where he is after living that childhood? Or how could she keep going after her husband died right before their child was born? It's like,
yeah, exactly. Because that's like the other part of the story is that for most of my military career, I did it as a single dad. Because my daughter's mom unfortunately struggled with addiction and she dipped out. So I was balancing leaving my child with my parents when I would have to go and do things and couldn't be at home. And that was hard. I missed some important stuff. I missed my daughter's first words. For example, I've missed birthdays. I've missed Christmases. I've missed, the school award ceremony, all those things that, to a kid, that particular day is the biggest deal in the world. And the fact that dad wasn't there is devastating. And also at the time, there were people that needed my help. And I hope that, my daughter, who's now an adult, can look back on those times and understand that I would have given anything in the world to be there on that particular birthday or Christmas or whatever that thing was that I didn't get to be at. And also, people needed help, and I was able to help.
People are alive because you're able to help.
Right. And so it comes with a certain level of balancing that responsibility as a parent or as a spouse with that responsibility of the oath that you swore, which sometimes can be a heavy thing to carry, but that's why not everyone does it. In fact, that's why very few people do. But the people that can hopefully do. And a difference is made in some capacity because of that. But it doesn't come without sacrifice. And it sounds cliche to say things like, well, freedom isn't free, but the fact of the matter is that it's not. It's not free. In fact, it's very costly in terms of blood, sweat, and tears. And so at the end of it all, those of us that thankfully, gratefully, we don't all give everything when we serve, but everyone gave something. And so to kind of give the flip side of the coin about the conversation about, thank you for your service. The thing is that it is good for folks to recognize that sacrifice that's made by the people that served and by their family members that in their own right served alongside them. Because there are a lot of wives and husbands and moms and dads and brothers and sisters and kids who gave up something because that person in their life had to be somewhere else that day or that week or that year to do something that very few people are willing or able to do. And so for all the military families out there, they deserve that same level of thanks.
And that's one of the things we wanted to do on this podcast, is not just make it a veteran and first responder thing. Gold Star families, family members. Right. I think we got a couple people we're trying to get their wives or their husbands on.
Yeah.
Because we want to know those stories. Yeah.
Right.
There's those long nights during deployment where life sucks.
Absolutely. And their military spouses and military kids sometimes have like just as crazy of stories as that family member that was gone on deployment or gone on training and comes back and this thing or that thing happened while I was gone. Man, military families got some wild stories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they deserve to get to say their piece too.
All right. Any last words?
I guess just that I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to share. Hopefully, some part of what I've shared will resonate with someone and be helpful to them or be comforting to them or inspiring to them. And that I hope that others will come and share their stories as well. And just that we appreciate everyone who has served and the families that served alongside of them, because without the folks who are willing to do those difficult things, we wouldn't have what we have in terms of freedoms and opportunities. And so I don't want to underplay that or take that for granted in any way, because a whole lot of sacrifices happened for us to be able to sit here across from each other at this table and say whatever we want to say into these microphones.
Yeah. I completely agree. And on that note, again, as I tell everyone else, if you ever want to come back on, you're more than welcome to.
Absolutely.
I think it'd be cool. We've been at this for 2.5 hours now. It doesn't even, again, never feels like it.
Right. Yeah, it went by very quickly, but no, it'd be my pleasure to come back again and talk about, whatever topic, any topic at all, really, that people find helpful or inspiring or amusing. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you coming on. Thank you for telling. Thank you for talking. I learned.
Yeah.
So, all right, then.
I learned how to follow orders. I learned how to care.